Hello and welcome to the October 2020 Maths and English webinar update. You'll see that we are now running 3 live sessions each month, and if you haven't already signed up for those, you're welcome to do so via the Maths and English Resource Hub. Purpose for us running 3 sessions was to give more opportunity for people to join these sessions live, and when we're running the live sessions there is an opportunity at the end of each at the end of the input for those sessions to ask questions of us. If you're listening to this recording, don't feel that you can't get in touch if you have any particular questions or comments. There is an email address on this slide, pre-employment@sittinggolds.com. As before, these sessions will normally last no more than about 20 minutes to half an hour, and there'll normally be a specific topic or theme each month. They're very deliberately not always about functional skills, although these sessions are generally aimed at practitioners and providers based in England. However, if you are based elsewhere in the UK, we will be running a separate series of webinars with content more relevant to the qualifications and context that you're working with, so watch this space for those. Even though we're now going to be running the live sessions 3 times each month, we're also going to be making a recorded version available. Usually that will be uploaded once the last of the 3 live sessions has taken place, and of course, as I said a second ago, you're welcome to email us with any comments or questions using the address shown here, pre-employment@sittinggolds.com. So, probably worth quickly reminding you about the Maths and English landing page, and that is sittinggolds.com/Maths and English. When you get to that page, you will see this image in front of you with links to click on depending on where you are based and what qualifications you work with. There is a shortcut link. That top left box takes you straight to information about functional skills, but there is then, as you can see, a separate box that also takes you to all of our Maths and English qualifications that are available in England. You will see actually from both of those links there are links through to our Maths and English Resource Hub, where you can find various bits of information about the full range of our support resources, and also information about these webinars. We also have an updates page specifically for functional skills, and that is a page where we will share any particular pertinent or relevant time critical information, so that is often a useful page to kind of check fairly frequently. And then of course there are then the actual qualification pages where we provide the documents, sample assessments and other materials that are specific to each qualification. One big bit of news to be aware of, and this actually only was confirmed in the last in the latter part of October. We have received notification that they, DFE and Ofqual, have agreed to a further extension of the last certification date for the legacy functional skills qualifications. I think really taking into account the challenges that people are continuing to have in terms of delivering assessments. So originally these were due to end in August 2020. They were then extended through till December. The last certification date is now the 31st of July 2021. However, do bear in mind that that is an absolute deadline, and that does mean that all assessments will need to have been completed, quality assured and processed well before that date. As you can see, there are some dates on this slide that after which we will begin the process of withdrawing and phasing out access to the legacy qualifications assessments. Again, just to be reiterate and clarify, functional skills ICT hasn't changed, and therefore 374803 will be continuing. There are no plans at the moment to withdraw those qualifications. We'll say a bit more about how we've adapted some of the invigilation requirements for functional skills in a moment, but first a couple of other broadly related points. We have recently updated the assessment guidance for speaking, listening and communicating across all 5 levels of functional skills English to make it absolutely clear that it is possible to carry these out remotely. We did introduce these initially as part of the contingency measures for COVID, but we've now taken the opportunity to make this a business as usual arrangement. Of course, speaking and listening should only be done remotely where candidates are able to do this and are happy and comfortable about doing so. But for many of us, holding discussions over online meeting platforms has become a pretty normal way of working, and it was only fair that we perhaps reflected that in the qualification. Another thing, just to be very, very clear, is that we have now got clearance from the regulator to allow remote speaking listening within the legacy functional skills qualifications. Initially it was only for the reformed, but we've now got confirmation that this can also be applied to the legacy qualifications. We'll be issuing some further guidance just to sort of clarify exactly how that will work. Another thing just to be aware of is that we've recently issued a statement about our plans for developing a remote invigilation solution for externally marked functional skills exams. To be frank about this, it's not an easy thing to get right, bearing in mind the complexity of functional skills exams compared to some of the multiple choice tests where remote invigilation is already being used. Nevertheless, it is something that we are working on. It's a case of when rather than if. And we do hope to have a viable and scalable model in place over the next few months that will be able to manage and deliver functional skills exams. We've made an update, or we've made a number of updates to the instructions for conducting exams document, the ICE document that applies to functional skills. So there is now an updated version of this document. Quite a few technical changes. A lot of them are responding to COVID and introducing, firstly, some extra flexibility, but also some admin changes to sort of take account of the circumstances we're all operating in. First of these, I think, to be aware of is that we've relaxed some of the requirements around notifying us when exam dates are moved. So there is now a latitude of up to 5 working days either before the date for which a paper delivered exam has been scheduled. So they can be varied up to 5 working days either side without you having to inform us. In the case of on-screen, it's slightly more flexible. You've got actually 10 calendar days latitude either side. So 5 working days for paper, 10 calendar days for on-screen. You can, if things really require it, you can get in touch with us, and there is now an on-screen form for getting in touch with us if you need to move the dates further than that. I appreciate, particularly the world we're all operating in with now, that could occasionally happen. So there is a mechanism by which that can be done, but you would, if you're varying by more than those few days, you would need to get in touch with us to sort of talk that through with us. Another thing that we're now allowing for paper exams that we haven't previously is allowing individual candidates to take the exam on a different day from the others who are on the same attendance register. It's always been the case for on-screen that you've been able to do that because entries are for individuals, but that's now also possible for paper, again within those 5 days. We've relaxed some of the requirements around notifying us of the sites that you're using for exams. So we, up till now, have always required you to sort of let us know in advance of every location that you would ever use as an exam site. We're no longer asking for that information up front. What we are, however, saying is that you need to keep a record of all sites that you are using, and we may ask you for that information at some point, particularly if we were planning to carry out an audit, for example. We've also put some practical or clarified that we're happy for some practical adaptations to be made. For example, where learners are entitled to a reader or a practical assistant, we appreciate there may be some care needing to be taken around social distancing when that happens. And for example, if a learner's doing an on-screen test, the screen could be duplicated to another screen to kind of make that possible. So there's some guidance being added to allow for that. We've also clarified that kind of quarantining of materials and papers is now perfectly acceptable. For example, certainly we're aware in some cases centres are wanting to kind of keep completed exam scripts in quarantine for 72 hours before they're posted back to us. So we're clarifying that that's absolutely fine to do that. We've also clarified that it's perfectly acceptable, for example, for papers to be placed on exam desks and collect before learners come into the room, and for them to be left on the desk and collected after learners have left the room, whereas previously obviously the assumption was that they were handed out in front of the learner, and again for social distancing reasons we appreciate why that may not need to be the case. Again, it's really about allowing you to do those things where necessary, or where there's kind of a need to do so. It's not us requiring you to do it that way. Also, just to be aware, we have mentioned this previously, but just to reassure you that it hasn't fallen off the agenda, we are still planning to introduce a change to the on-screen functional skills maths exams to enable candidates to use a handheld calculator whilst they're working on the section 2 of the exam. As you can see from these instructions, it does place a little bit more responsibility on invigilators to manage this, in particular to ensure that candidates aren't using their calculator during section 1. But on balance, we kind of felt that was preferable to the current system where learners aren't always comfortable using the Evolve Systems inbuilt calculator. We haven't got an exact date for those changes, but it is something that we are planning to introduce over the course of the winter, and we will of course provide further details about exactly how this will work nearer the time. It won't be something that you suddenly find one day you open a test and that has changed. It is something we will tell you about first. Another thing we're working on is some adaptations for our ESOL Skills for Life qualifications. It is worth saying that these are generally more straightforward than they might be for some of the other awarding organisations that offer ESOL qualifications, principally because the model that we operate already operates with an on-demand availability of assessments and with largely centre assessed. So there aren't sort of formal changes like having to change the way in which external examiners come in, or a need to tell us in advance when the exams are taking place. So there's quite a lot of latitude there already. However, one of the things that we are going to provide some specific guidance on is conducting speaking and listening remotely. As with functional skills, we're absolutely fine with that as a principle, but we are having to give a little bit of thought to the practicalities of particularly activity 1, the listening activity, and how that can work remotely. So it is a yes in principle to that, but we will certainly before the end of October be issuing some further guidance that will clarify kind of precisely how that's going to work. A couple of other things to be aware of, particularly if you're working with apprentices. If you are used to apprenticeships, you'll probably no doubt be aware that there has for some time been a rule that learners on, or certainly apprentices working towards a level 2 standard where they're required to achieve Maths and English at level 1 are expected to study and take the test at level 2. That requirement is currently suspended, and the ESFA has recently clarified that that suspension will remain in place until at least March 2021. I imagine there will be some further guidance issued at that point, or there'll be an update to the apprenticeship funding rules that making that clear. But at the moment, those apprentices need only achieve the qualification at level 1, and there's no requirement for them to attempt at level 2 as long as they've got those level 1 qualifications. However, please do note that the minimum qualifications do need to have been achieved before apprentices pass through the gateway. There was a temporary relaxation to this before the summer, and that was really just to allow for any apprentices that might have been waiting on functional skills results that had been submitted via the CAG process, the Centre Assessment Grading arrangements that were in place before the summer. But now those arrangements have been and gone, and we're back to normal in inverted commas assessment arrangements, and that dispensation has now gone. There have also, just if you've been following this, there have also been a couple of minor tweaks to the ESFA list of qualifications other than functional skills or GCSE that can be accepted where apprentices have already achieved these. Again, you can see on this slide a link through to the current ESFA list. Principally, that list relates to historic qualifications or qualifications gained from other parts of the UK, and there's also some guidance on international qualifications that can be accepted where they're deemed to be level 2 equivalent. Would be remiss of us not to say something about traineeships, given some of the government's recent announcements about these, and particularly the pledge to provide 30,000 new traineeships in England. At the risk of stating the obvious, all trainees are expected to study Maths and English as part of their programme, particularly if they don't already hold level 2 qualifications in these subjects. The rules generally, given the programme hours are generally slightly shorter than they would be for a full-time study programme, they are a little bit less prescriptive than those for apprenticeships or full-time study programmes. And in particular, there might be opportunities to use some of our bite-sized Maths and English awards, as well as the more high stakes qualifications like functional skills. You can see again that we have an apprenticeships webpage, sittingguilds.com/traineeships, where you can go to find further information, particularly about our apprenticeship, our traineeships offer. Another thing, we have mentioned this during some of our previous webinars before the summer, but just to be aware, here's a quick reminder about the returning to the workplace module that we developed as a kind of almost like a self-assessment tool for anybody returning from kind of working at home into a workplace environment, and it's got some kind of obvious do's and don'ts around distancing and hygiene and the things that we're all grappling with as we adjust to the sort of post-COVID world. It's there as a useful kind of digital credential as for people to use, and it takes only about 15 to 20 minutes to complete. Finally, would be worth me just quickly recapping on some of the differing forms of support that we're going to be offering over the course of this year. As well as these regular webinar updates and Q&A sessions, we're also going to be hosting some what we're calling practice sharing networks, the first of which will be early in November. We're initially framing these around functional skills, English and maths, but with more topics as we gauge interest in those. Separate to those practice sharing networks, we're going to be also providing some regular slots for anyone who is new to working with Sitting Guilds or looking to get up to speed with our Maths and English qualifications and other services. Again, they are primarily a space to ask questions as well as a chance for us to run through some of the fundamentals that you might need. We're also planning to produce a number of extra recorded presentations, so you've got information about things like our bite-sized qualifications more easily to hand. But of course, with all of these things, we would welcome any further ideas and suggestions, and you're always, of course, welcome to get in touch with us. And it just remains to thank you for listening into this recorded version. You are welcome to sign up for the live sessions if you haven't already done so. You can do so via the Maths and English Resource Hub by following the link from the Maths and English landing page shown on this slide. If you have any questions you'd like to fire at us, by all means do so using the email address shown here, pre-employment@sittingguilds.com, or you can always follow Amanda, Catherine or myself on social media